No! God, please, no! No!
A few days ago, the entire internet lost its mind over Windows 12. A leaked subscription-based AI operating system, mandatory NPU chips, a floating taskbar, something called Core PC. It was everywhere. Reddit, Twitter, YouTube thumbnails, tech blogs, 14,000 upvotes on our technology alone. And then it all collapsed. Because the leak? It was written by AI. Not by a Microsoft insider. Not by a leaker. By language models citing other language models in a closed loop of hallucinated nonsense. But here's what nobody is focusing on. And this is the part that actually matters. The reason that fake story spread like wildfire isn't because it was convincing. It's because Microsoft's reputation has cratered so badly that a subscription-based AI Windows sounded completely plausible.
Totally plausible.
That's the real story. And it's way more interesting than any fake leak. How AI wrote the biggest fake story in tech this year. So let me set this up properly because the context here is wild. Early March 2026, PC World, a major, respected publication, publishes an article about Windows 12, codenamed Hudson Valley Next, built on a modular Core PC architecture, deep Copilot integration. Requires a neural processing unit with 40 TOPS of computing power, possible subscription model for premium AI features, a 2026 launch window. The article hits Reddit, gets picked up by aggregators, ends up on Google News. People are furious. Comment sections are on fire. Everyone's saying, this is exactly the kind of garbage Microsoft would pull. One problem. The article was a translation from a German sister publication called PC Welt. No source links, no attribution, no original reporting. PC World's own executive editor, Brad Chacos, had to publicly flag that the piece didn't meet their editorial standards. And then Windows Latest, Windows Central, and multiple independent researchers traced the claims back to their origin. AI-generated content farms citing each other in a loop. Websites referencing websites that were referencing websites, and none of them had an actual source. The entire Windows 12 narrative was an AI hallucination echo chamber. Now, here's where it gets interesting, because every single detail in that fake leak, it was real. Just not from 2026. The Core PC modular architecture concept, that was leaked back in 2022 and 2023 during the Panos Panay era at Microsoft. The floating taskbar with rounded corners and system indicators in the top right corner, Microsoft accidentally showed that UI concept at Ignite 2022. The Hudson Valley codename? That was a real internal project name from years ago. The subscription flags? Those were found in internal code back in 2023, but they turned out to reference Windows 365 for Enterprise, not a consumer OS subscription. So the AI didn't invent Windows 12 from nothing. It stitched together two-year-old scraps of real information, stripped the dates, and presented it as breaking news. And that is a problem that goes way beyond Microsoft. But I actually want to talk about why this story stuck. Because the technical debunking is the easy part. The harder question is, what does it say about Microsoft that millions of people immediately believed the worst possible version of their next product? Let me tell you what's actually happening at Microsoft right now, because this is the story most people are sleeping on. Windows 11 is in crisis. Not, oh, it has some bugs crisis. Full-on, executives disabling comments on social media crisis. In November 2025, Pavan Devuluri, he's the president of Windows and Devices, the guy who replaced Panos Panay, posted on X about Windows evolving into an agentic AI platform. Thousands of negative replies, so many that he turned off the comments entirely on a post about the future of Windows, from the head of Windows. Think about that for a second. January 2026 was maybe the worst single month in Windows 11's history. The first update of the year caused shutdown failures across the board. Microsoft had to push an emergency out-of-band patch, then another emergency patch days later because OneDrive and Dropbox were crashing. Then they found out that business PCs were failing to boot entirely because a December update had left machines in what Microsoft's own advisory called an improper state. Business PCs not booting because of a Windows update. And through all of this, Microsoft kept shoving Copilot into everything. Copilot button in Notepad, Copilot button in Paint, Copilot in File Explorer, Copilot in Settings. Aggressive pop-ups pushing Edge and Bing even when you've set Chrome or Firefox as your default. OneDrive nags so persistent that at one point you literally couldn't close the app without explaining why you were closing it. They ran a poll asking users how they felt about Microsoft scaling back AI features. 68% wanted a master off switch for all of it. 31% said it's about time to clean up the bloat. And the number of people who said, I actually use those features? 0. Not a rounding error. 0. So here's the thing that Bill Gates said years ago, and I'm paraphrasing from an old interview, about how great software comes from deeply understanding what people want to do and keeping things simple. That the best programs are the ones where someone has a complete sense of how everything works and has concentrated on simplicity to an incredible degree. Now look at Windows 11 in 2026. 1 billion users. Yes, it hit that milestone 130 days faster than Windows 10, but 1 billion users who are actively fighting their own operating system. That's not adoption. That's captivity. And this is where the Bill Gates angle in these clickbait titles falls apart, by the way. Gates hasn't been involved in Windows development in over 20 years. He stepped down as CEO in 2000, left the chairman role in 2014, left the board entirely in 2020. He currently owns less than 1% of Microsoft stock. Satya Nadella is CEO. Pavan Devuluri runs Windows. Gates is focused on the Gates Foundation and, well, let's just say he's dealing with some very different headlines right now involving unsealed documents and public apologies to his foundation staff. The man is not sitting in Redmond panicking about Windows 12 leaks. That framing is pure fiction, almost as fictional as the leaks themselves. Okay, so what is Microsoft actually doing about this mess? In late January, Devuluri made a statement to The Verge that was basically unprecedented for a Windows executive. He acknowledged the feedback directly and said 2026 would focus on fixing performance, reliability, and the overall experience. The exact quote was about earning trust back with the Windows community. Internally, they're calling their strategy swarming, rapidly redirecting engineering resources away from new features and toward core stability and reliability fixes. And it goes deeper. According to reporting from Zach Bowden at Windows Central, Microsoft is actively pulling back on Copilot integration. Some of those AI buttons in Notepad and Paint? Under review, possibly getting removed or at least losing the Copilot branding. Windows Recall, the controversial feature that screenshots everything you do, is being reconsidered entirely. They might even abandon the Recall name because of how toxic it became. The whole agentic OS vision that Devuluri posted about, quietly shelved in favor of what they're calling a fundamentals-first approach for 2026. This is a massive reversal. Microsoft spent all of 2025 cramming AI into every corner of Windows, and now they're spending 2026 ripping it back out, or at least dialing it way down. Meanwhile, the competition isn't standing still. Apple's Mac market share keeps growing. SteamOS and Linux distributions like Bazzite are gaining real traction with gamers. Linux hit an all-time high of 3.2% on Steam's hardware survey in late 2025. That might sound small, but it was below 1% for years. Google is developing something called Aluminum OS to succeed Chrome OS for laptops and desktops. And here's a stat that should genuinely worry Redmond. The February 2026 Steam hardware survey showed a 12% increase in Windows 10 users and a 10% decrease in Windows 11 users. People are actually going back to Windows 10, even though Microsoft officially ended support for it. So what should you actually do with this information? First, Windows 12 is not coming in 2026. Probably not in 2027 either. Microsoft's focus right now is triage on Windows 11. The next major version on the roadmap is Windows 11 26 H2. not a new OS. If anyone tells you Windows 12 is imminent, check their sources. If the sources are other articles that also don't have sources, you know what that is now. Second, if you're still on Windows 10, you need a plan. Support ended October 2025. That means no more security patches. Your options are upgrading to Windows 11, which, yes, is getting better if Microsoft follows through on the swarming initiative, switching to a Linux distribution like Ubuntu, Fedora, or Linux Mint. Or, if you're a gamer, looking seriously at SteamOS or Bazzite. Valve's Proton compatibility layer now runs about 90% of Windows games on Linux. That number was unthinkable 5 years ago. Third, and this is the bigger picture takeaway, be skeptical of AI-generated tech news. This Windows 12 situation was a perfect case study. Real old data, stripped of context, repackaged as new information, amplified by SEO incentives and confirmation bias. It fooled major publications. It'll happen again. The real story here was never Windows 12. It was never Bill Gates panicking. It was a tech company that's lost so much trust with its users that a fake product built entirely from AI-generated nonsense became the most believable thing they'd heard all year. And that should worry Microsoft way more than any leak, real or imagined. If Pavan Davuluri and his team actually follow through on the swarming initiative, if Windows 11 gets meaningfully more stable, less bloated, and stops treating users like monetization targets, then maybe this becomes the turning point. But right now, 1 billion people are using an operating system that its own maker just admitted needs to be fixed. And the clock is ticking. I'm going to be covering the Copilot rollback story and the SteamOS alternative angle in detail soon. That one's going to be interesting.